It's useful to talk about in this in these learning moments is in many circumstances. Now, to varying degrees, this is applicable to your individual projects, but often it comes up where you need to store additional information about the logged in user more than just their email address. And in class, we talked before about how we can actually go in here and we can add, new properties, right? And so on and so forth. Tab. Well, you know what I'm trying to do. I'm just not doing it. Right? And we can add, additional things to the application user themselves. And the only problem with that approach is there's an awful lot of places where we have to go through in the controllers and views that manage the logged in users and add, these new fields in there and so on. It's not exactly trivial. The other reason why we might hesitate to do that is quite often, as I've mentioned before, we'll have a common login system that multiple applications will use. So it could be that we need to track something in a given application that isn't applicable at all to other applications, right? So another reason or alternate approach we can do is simply store the user profile information in its own table, right? Taking advantage of the fact that the identity model currently is set up right now that every user has a unique email address, right? And that's something we can relate to. Even though we don't necessarily have referential integrity, that isn't the end of the world. There are many systems that operate just fine without having referential integrity. But if we can relate it on a common piece of information we're sure is there and unique, then it's pretty forgivable to go ahead and move forward with that, right? So I have some code up here in Blackboard. So if you go to the information I just added here, I've got a few different copy-paste files. So this first one is code for user profile in its own table, basically, right? Now, I was feeling a little bit despicable as I prepared this demo. So, the question comes up, well, what are you going to name this new entity? Like, you might think user, right? Well, the trouble is we already have user all over the place, okay? So you might have staff or employee or, all kinds of variations of ideas. But because I was feeling, as I said, a little despicable, I figured we'd call them minions. Okay, all of our logged in users are minions. So I'll add a class, okay, into our models folder. Add a class, simply called Minion. And there we go. So I might move my copy-paste file, just over to the other screen so it's easier for me to get back and forth, right? So what are we going to put inside Minion? Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's very similar to at least what I had planned here to other entities we've done before. Right? I figured we'd probably want to have a full name broken out so we can know the first, middle, last name possibly of each minion. Obviously, I have data annotation, so I'll just add that. And I figured a phone number, okay, is quite often needed, as well as the email. We have to have that. Plus, we want to make sure it's required. Okay, we can't create a minion without an email or we won't be able to relate them to the logged in user. And we want to make sure it's unique as well. So I'll just add the other data annotation schema namespace there for that, right? And you could add, whatever else is applicable to your situation. Plus, I decided to throw in my usual summary properties as well because they'll make it handy in the user interface and so on. Right? So that's good. I'll add this new Minion entity, right? So this is really an extension of the application user. Anything I want to have in here, I can relate on the email and bundle up into this entity as well. Obviously, there's a bit of other work to do in my DAL, right? I'll have to add a new DB set so I can manage my minions, right? And I'm not going to worry about seeding it at all. Okay, but of course I'll have to do a bit of a update to the database. So we'll get our package manager going here. I have to add a migration, okay, for the new model in DB set. We'll just add migration. Come on, tab. There we go. I just call it new Minion. Oh, okay. As long as I don't in the class, I'm okay. I don't care about the name of the migration. Oh, okay. and we wait. There we go. Okay, so it's just creating the new table, right? And that's about it. So I'll just update database now. So we're ready to start using our new minion, right? We're going to do this a bit of a step at a time approach, okay? So we have it in our entities, we have our minion now, right? So how are we going to use this? Well, you know, one of the things that's pretty obvious when you're looking at the screen, when you're running the application, is up at the upper right there, normally we have that little partial view that gives us our register and login information and so on, right? So if we come down to views, we know that's in the shared, right? We have our layout page and we have this login partial. By the way, if we haven't talked a lot about partial views before, a partial view basically is one that doesn't expect to have a layout page, right? So it's like a snippet of a view. If you try to load a partial view on its own, you don't get a header and footer and, you know, all the stuff you get with your normal layout, right? So they're mainly used to be like a sub page within a page, you might say, right? So I'll just get rid of this, don't show that again. All right, so what is in our login partial? Well, this is that information that shows up there where we have you know, a register or log off links, right? So the register and login links are there if there's nobody logged in, okay? If they are logged in, then we show them, you know, the fact that hello, getting username, right? And then they can go to the logout form and so on and so forth, right? So it's pretty straightforward. But what we're going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of a drop-down list instead of just having a single link here, right? So I'm just going to replace this one section. Oh, sorry. All right. So I'll just replace this. Okay. Oh, what did I do? Didn't copy first. Okay. Let me get copied, and then I'll paste. So I'm just going to add a drop down, okay, to the menu system here, right? Maybe I'll say welcome, actually, because it used to say that there. And then we'll show the get username, but we have menu, right? So then I just have a little here, a little caret, the character, so you kind of gets the visual clue. It's a drop down menu. And then in the menu, then we have our action link to do the normal manage, where we can change password, and you know that's what was basically here before. But I'm also going to put an action link to go to the details view of my new Minions controller that I haven't made yet, but I'm planning ahead, right? And I'm going to call it Manage Profile. Right, so you can see what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to create a controller to manage my minions, but really it's just related to filling out the profile or managing the profile for the logged in user. So I'm never going to need an index, right? Because this is really just for whoever's logged in to let them manage their profile. So I'm going to take advantage of the details view, which focuses on the one record, okay, the one minion who's going to be logged in, right? So that's going to be the idea there. Okay, so I'll leave it like this for now, and we'll just go and we'll start adding a controller then. Now I'm going to be taking out a lot of the stuff, but I might as well include it to begin with. So we'll add a regular controller the normal way we do, okay, MVC5 controller. Oh, wait a second. I better just do a build, because you know you always should do a build before adding a controller. There we go. Now I'll add the controller, MVC5 controller for minions, right? And I can call it minions controller, that's just fine. And we'll let that cook for a moment. It's finished baking. All right, so here's our controller. Now we're going to want to change a few things. One thing I said, we'll never really need the index. So if, you know, but you should never really remove index because it's in the default routing to look for an index. So what I usually do in a situation like that is I'll redirect to the main page. Okay, same technique you saw me use the other day as well. So I'll just redirect to the details. Okay, so if they try to go to the index, hey, I'm just going to end up looking at the one and only Minions profile, right? So the details view, guess what? I don't even need this anymore, because the details is going to bring up the details for whoever's logged in, right? So that's what I'll do inside here. Okay, I will actually pull the minion, right? So I'm going to replace all this. I'll pull the minion, okay, out of my minions DB set, where the email matches user.identity.name, okay? Oh, by the way, the other thing I have to do here to make sure is just at the top, add authorize, because you can't come here unless you're logged in, right? And that takes care of that issue. So no one can get here unless they're already logged in. Okay, so they're logged in, so that means they will have a user.identity.name, right? And I match that to the email, and that pulls up the individual minion. So if they're null, okay, if they don't exist yet, their profile record, then I'll just redirect to my create, right? So if they go to manage profile, get kicked over here to details, but they haven't actually filled it out yet, then it just sends them over to create, because they have to create the profile the first time, right? Otherwise, we just return the view passing the minion object, okay, and then they can complete their profile, or actually see the profile, right? So for the rest of it, I'll maybe copy the rest of my code and get it in place, and then we'll just talk about it, because it's sometimes easier to do that, okay? So from create right to the end here, okay? All right. So we talked about details. Okay, that just shows the details. Okay, if it doesn't exist, then we go to create. Well, create is simple in terms of the initial view. We just display the blank view, right, for them to fill out the information. Okay. And after they post it back, though, okay, we take our usual approach, binding the information. The default model builder will build us a minion object, okay, which will add and save changes. But then we're just going to redirect after success back to details. We'll show just the profile for this logged in user, right? If there is a problem, then we obviously need to give them some feedback. The only unique constraint on here is for the email, but of course that's already supplied by the logged in user, so I don't really need to worry about violating the unique constraint on that, because it just won't happen, right? And that's our create process. Oh, along with that, maybe let's start looking at the views, because they do work in harmony, don't they? Right? So let's come down here to the minion views, okay? And by the way, as I said, I don't need the index, so I can just delete it. And I'm not going to worry about deleting right now either. Truth is, very rarely in any real-world system do you delete that record of a user. Then you might disable them, prevent their login and so on, but especially if you're auditing information, okay, that such and such a user changed a record on such and such a date. Well, you don't want to ever delete the user, right? So it's not something, you might archive them and so on, but that's a whole discussion for another day. So all I really need are my edit, details, and create views, right? So maybe I'll start with the details view, because we've already dealt with details. And it's not much different, okay? I'm just going to change the heading a little bit, right? Sorry, I'm having a hard time selecting here. I probably should open this in Notepad instead. Okay, maybe I'll just do it a bit at a time, because there's so little to change here, right? Just say minion profile, okay, for both the title and so on. And really, the rest of this is all good, showing the information. Just the links at the bottom I want to change, right? I don't want two links, okay? I certainly don't want to go back to an index, because that would just be a circle. I'd just end up coming back to details. But probably we would want to provide the ability to edit, okay? Edit the profile, right, from the details view. And that way they can make changes if they, need to, a new phone number, things like that, right? Okay, but we can display all the information, and that's fine. Okay, now let's go on to the create. So in the create, there's a little bit more work to do here, right? So I will actually this time replace the whole kit and caboodle, and then we'll talk about the new code. Okay. So again, just create minion profile, create profile, right? One of the things you'll notice is, of course, okay, we aren't going to show the email address here. Right? They don't fill that in. We already have that because they're logged in, right? So I will include it in the form, just in the hidden input, and I'll get it right from user.identity.name. Because remember, they haven't created a profile yet, so I can't go into the minion. It doesn't have it. Okay. But that way it gets stored in the form and submitted with the other form values, and away we go. Then the usual ones that were scaffolded are fine, all the inputs for all the other fields, and basically that's it. Yeah, so that was the only real change, is the fact that we don't have an input for the email. We just get it from user.identity.name and store it inside the form. So coming back to the controller then, when we look at the create method, right, we do get the email from the data submitted, but of course we know that came from the actual logged in user, right? So that's why we're certain we're creating a minion that relates back to the logged in user. Last but not least is edit. So when we go to edit, again, we don't pass in an ID. We pull the minion up we're going to edit, right, from the database based on the logged in user, just to be safe and be sure. If they don't exist, once again, we'll send them back to create the profile. Otherwise, we return the edit view for the user, right? So let's look at the edit view now. Again, not a huge amount of change here, but it's probably easier if I copy and paste my code rather than mess it up at all. So most of it here, again, just the titles at the top of the page, right? And once more, I have my input type equals hidden from user.identity.name, right? So obviously we aren't going to edit the email. It's just stored inside the form controls, and away we go. We do have our regular save button, and our only action to make is to go back to the profile to the details view. So if we want to cancel basically and go back, we can do so. So it's not a huge amount of change here in any one of them. Just a little bit, basically the fact that we don't want to ever change the email, right? Because that's how we relate this record back to the logged in user. All right, so that's basically all we really have to do at the minimum. Okay, later on we'll talk about additional features we might want to do, but if I run it now, hopefully I won't get a build error unless I copied and pasted and left a character out somewhere or something. Should be okay. All right. So it came up on, because I was looking at the details view, so it kicked me over because it's in a controller decorated with authorized, so I would have to log in. Now, I haven't created any accounts here yet, right? Notice I don't even have migrations enabled, but that's okay. The default identity system just used the database initializer approach, so the first time I create a user, it will create all the tables for me anyway. So I'm not going to change it in any way. It doesn't hurt, right? So I'll register as a new user, Fred at outlook.com. Password, ooh, good thing I changed those settings so I can get away with my password of password. And it's going to create the user, and there we go. So it says welcome, okay, my login, but notice, see, I now have my drop down menu. So what we might do is say, well, let's go in and manage the profile now. So this should take me over to the details view, right, of the Minions controller, because I'm happy to be a minion, right? And now I have my regular form. Of course, it has all the validation for the required information and so on. So Fred, what's Fred's middle initial? Anybody remember? I'll make something up. Fred Flintstone, his phone number. And notice we don't do the email because, of course, this belongs to Fred already. So we create that, and there we go. So now we can see. So next time, if I'm off somewhere else, right, viewing information about this, that, or the other thing, and I come back here to manage profile, I go directly to the details. I did the first time too, but it instantly bumped me over to create because it didn't find a record for that particular email address. So that's why we were on the create, right? But now I could edit the profile. No, it's not Larry. Okay, it's Lou. How do you spell Lou? L-U? That's one of the ways? Okay. Fred Lou Flintstone. Okay, so you see I'm able to update. I can't change the email address, but that's fine. I shouldn't, because otherwise I would lose track of who's logged in. And that's basically as simple as that. But now we have this information. It's in a regular table. We can access this and do anything we want with it, right? So I'm going to stop recording now, and we'll start again.